Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are jumping right in to unpack a text that has literally shaped history. We're going to see how a profound, unimaginable test of faith on a mountain thousands of years ago actually connects directly to the nitty-gritty of your daily spiritual life.
Now, you might think we'd start this story in ancient Israel, right? Well, actually, scratch that. We're going to start in a garden in 386 AD, with a man who was right on the brink of absolute despair. This was Augustine, someone who, eventually became one of the most influential Christian leaders in history. But he definitely didn't start out that way. He was grappling with a deep, crushing sense of bondage to his own choices. And his story perfectly sets the stage for us to really understand the massive weight of the biblical text we're digging into today.
Looking at life, Augustine was born to a middle-income farmer, and his early years were honestly just marked by a lot of wandering. Around 370 AD, his father actually converted to Christianity, but Augustine, he went the complete opposite direction. By 373, he leaves for school, throwing himself into philosophy and frankly just chasing his own lusts, totally ignoring his mother's prayers. But the source material notes that God had all these different ingredients cooking in Augustine's life, and it all hit a boiling point in 386 AD. He's sitting in this garden weeping, asking himself why he just can't break free from his own ugly sins. And suddenly, he overhears a child singing this simple repeating line, "Take it and read." Prompted by that child's voice, Augustine just opens the Bible to the very first passage he sees, which happens to be Romans 13. And boom! In an instant, that text completely broke his chains. It changed his life overnight and, by extension, ended up impacting the entire Western world. It's just a brilliant testament to this idea that this ancient text is living and active, It still speaks directly to the deepest, darkest places of the human mind today. Our source material actually uses a great analogy here. It compares reading these profound scriptures to eating honey or dolma, that stuffed Middle Eastern dish. It's sweet, sure, but it is incredibly heavy. It requires very slow digestion. You really can't just speed read it. You've got to let your mind and your spirit process it. And taking that slow, delivered approach is exactly what we need to do right now as we move into one of the heaviest stories in all of human history, the story of Abraham. To fully digest Abraham's story, we first have to understand what true worship actually meant for these ancient figures. Today, I think we so often just equate worship with singing songs in a building once a week, right? But according to the theological framework we're looking at, worship is fundamentally about ascribing worth. It's about what you are giving ultimate value to with your entire life. As we're about to see, true worship costs something. It demands action. And that brings us to the ultimate test God gave to Abraham after he had walked faithfully for 25 long years. In Genesis 22, God's instructions are a literal gut punch. Abraham is told to take his son, his only son, the one he loves, Isaac, and sacrifice him. Just pause and imagine the psychological weight of that for a second. God places Abraham between two totally impossible choices: honor God or spare his beloved son, who is the literal fulfillment of a 25-year promise. What follows is a grueling 3-day journey to the region of Moriah. That's 3 full days for Abraham to agonizingly sit with what he's just been commanded to do. But, we often completely overlook the other person in this story. Isaac was not a helpless toddler here. He was a young man, strong enough to carry all the heavy wood up the side of a mountain himself. He could have easily outrun his 100-year-old father. He absolutely could have fought back. Yet there is zero hint of a struggle in the text. Instead, Isaac shows this childlike wonder and profound trust, willingly allowing his father to bind him and place him on the altar. The tension here is absolutely suffocating. Abraham actually raises the blade. He's proven that he values God above absolutely everything else, even above the very promise God gave him. And just as the knife goes up, this urgent call from heaven breaks through. God steps in and stops the unimaginable. God never ever intended for Isaac to die. He was proving the absolute genuineness of Abraham's faith. Because, as the book of James explains later on, faith isn't just some claim you make with your mouth, right? It's made complete by your actions. Okay, get ready for a massive theological plot twist, because this completely reframes the whole narrative. For centuries, people have just instinctively cast Jesus in the role of Isaac, the beloved son offered up. But the source text presents a fascinating shift. While Jesus is absolutely God's beloved son, in this specific mountain scene, we are Isaac. Every single one of us is Isaac, bound by sin, lying on the wood, facing judgment. Jesus is actually the ram in the thicket. He's the unseen substitute that God himself provided to take the place of the bound believer. Think about it. When Abraham looked up, he saw that ram, and he named the place "The Lord Will Provide." Fast forward over 1,000 years later, And John the Baptist points right at Jesus of Nazareth and finally identifies the ultimate fulfillment of that provision. Jesus, much like Isaac, carried his own wood up a hill. He completely trusted his father. But unlike Isaac, Jesus wasn't spared. He willingly laid down his life, totally of his own accord, as the ultimate substitute for all of humanity.
So, what does this all mean for us? This act of substitution, the cross, essentially communicates two profound, almost contradictory things about you and me. Number one, it says that you are far more wicked than you think, because it literally took the sacrifice of the Son of God to cover your failures. But number two, it says that you are far more loved than you can possibly comprehend, because God willingly offered that substitute so that you wouldn't have to perish.
And because we have been shown this immense, mind-blowing mercy as the beneficiaries of that substitute, our response can't just be to say thanks and move on. This loops us right back to our definition of worship. The Apostle Paul writes in Romans 12 that modern believers are called to climb onto the altar themselves. But here's the massive catch. You aren't called to die. Because the ram has already been sacrificed, we are called to be living sacrifices.
Practically speaking, being a living sacrifice means handing over the rights to the whole shebang. Your pride, your guilt and past pain, your future hopes, your wealth, your deeply held dreams, all of it goes on the altar. And you know what the hardest part is? Unlike a slain sacrifice, a living sacrifice has the ability to just crawl right off the altar when things get tough. So the daily challenge is consciously choosing to stay there. And really, the only practical way to do that is by keeping your eyes completely fixed on the ultimate ram, Jesus, rather than fixating on the intense trials of your everyday life.
Now, to wrap our heads around the absolute confidence we can have in this ancient text, it all comes down to a really cool linguistic guarantee. When God conferred his promise to Abraham, he didn't just give his word. He swore an oath by himself, and he used a very specific, deliberate phrase. He promised that through Abraham's seed, singular, not seeds plural, all nations of the earth would be blessed. That singular focus pointed directly forward to one specific person, Jesus, meaning the ultimate blessing was never just about a physical bloodline, it was always about anyone in any nation who shares the faith of Abraham.
As we wrap up this explainer, we've gone on quite the journey, haven't we? From a weeping philosopher in a garden, up a grueling mountain path with a father and son, all the way to the ultimate substitute provided on the cross. It all connects so beautifully to show us what a proven faith really looks like. But it leaves us with a pretty challenging question, and it's the one I want to leave you with today. Knowing that the ultimate substitute was provided for you, knowing the ram took your place, are you willing to stay on the altar today as a living sacrifice? Ponder that as you face whatever trials come your way this week. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.